Very good evening to everybody. We couldn't have got a more power-packed and influential panel on this topic than Barbara and Chad, two very accomplished experts in the area of supply chain. And I hope in the next 35 odd minutes, we are able to extract a lot of their experience and a lot of their wisdom in understanding how the world is getting shaped when it comes to this very important topic of supply chain. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Chad. Welcome to India. Welcome to Mumbai.
Yeah, thank you.
Barbara, a lot has happened in the last 4 years. COVID, geopolitical issues that have impacted the conversations around supply chain. What are the disruptions that you've seen, and how have you coped with these disruptions in the last 4 years?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's to the spot, of course. Can you hear me, hopefully? Very good. Yeah, I have to say it was very uncomfortable to experience this crisis and this disruption, to be really honest, because in our industry, we used to buy, and the suppliers used to sell black boxes as a tier one, right? So all of a sudden, we have had a big disruption, and we were not even able to know what is in this box. And of course, this was very uncomfortable. I think what I have to say after all this crisis, definitely there is a very deep desire to set up, to create, and to control your own supply chain, and also to know definitely and to mandate the most important commodities into the tier one population. Of course, I don't like this so much because I was also a tier one in one part of my career, and I know exactly how the commercial model goes. But I think as an OEM and as a car manufacturer, our strategy is to be on top of the main commodities and set up and control the supply chains.
Thanks, Barbara. And you know, we saw many products that were coming from your industry not being delivered on time because a couple of chips and a couple of electronic parts being supplied from one part of the world were not made available, or they could not be manufactured because rare metal in Ukraine was not available, or rare metal in South Africa was a problem from a supply chain perspective. So we started understanding these complexities a little bit better. I don't think, maybe I'm being exaggerating it a little bit, but I don't think we really understood the importance of supply chain and how globally integrated it was, right? I mean, that was the learning. Chad is from General Mills. He touches our lives almost on a daily basis when we go and eat Pillsbury or Haagen-Dazs ice cream. You have a very complex supply chain setup, and you went through the disruptions yourself, both through COVID and otherwise. How did you deal with the implications? Because you were supplying products which were hitting the market on a daily basis, and the volumes were huge. What's been your experience?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, I would say, General Mills is a company that is all about food. So as Ashish mentioned, it's about Pillsbury, it's about Haagen-Dazs in the United States and around the world, it's about Cheerios and El Paso, Nature Valley granola bars, etc. So we truly serve the world by making food that they love. And, during the pandemic, the need for us to really stand in that purpose and that mission was very, very great. People's lives were disrupted, and they counted on us at General Mills to provide a sense of normalcy in a very disrupted time, right? To bring joy and convenience, to feed families who are now eating at home, and so the demand surge that we saw was significant. But one of the things about food that's equally important is we've got to be safe. The food has to be safe. We have to keep our employees safe, and so there were a lot of disruptions, but some of the biggest disruptions were in our own factories. And so obviously we had to learn very quickly how to keep up with emerging science. We shared the science that we were learning to protect our employees with other outside partners, vendors, etc. so that they could be as good as they could be, that all helped within the ecosystem to provide for this great surge of food products. Obviously, it caused us to have to reshape the supply chain, which, most supply chains were just in time, were highly reliable, et cetera. We've got in the United States 150 production locations. We've got 4,000 vendors. We process 1.2 million orders per year. And so it's very complex, and we had to, reformulate products. We had to figure out how to make the most important products for our consumers. So deep prioritization, all while still, as I said, keeping our employees safe, being true to our values, and I think we met that mission very, very well. Obviously, risk and resilience were huge. We started a risk and resilience pod during that time where we were really looking at how can we see emerging disruptions sooner, how can we evaluate the risks that those disruptions might create in our supply chain, and then how can we use that visibility to really optimize which products we could produce at what times to maximize capacity and overall our ability to service the demand that was there.
And if you allow me to just add one thing, because you asked how was the experience, and I can only really reinforce your comment. I'm responsible for the end-to-end ecosystem industry, which means supplier and manufacturing. And actually, to be really honest with everyone, it was heavy on our shoulders. How do we get the employees safe? Thousands of people in a line next to each other. While COVID hit us, we have never experienced it before. And we also really felt responsible to keep all people in the supply chain safe. So we would immediately reach out to the supply base and implement the same measures, because obviously the OEMs had the best, maybe safety-relevant measures and methodologies in place. So it was really heavy on the leadership, to be honest.
But even your supply chain is very complex. I mean, for people who are not in the automotive industry, they may not have an appreciation of the complexities of your supply chain.
Yes, it's complex, and that's where technology helps. But I guess we will have more question on this. We have now, with all our new technology in supply chain, we have now the end-to-end visibility and transparency, and we can, as I said, screen the supply chain, also using AI-based technology to risk screening and risk scanning, and to look into potential scenarios which might occur if we did simulation E or simulation B, right? So
obviously, when you go through disruption of this kind, it changes the way people look at the investments that have to be made in supply chain. So there are two factors that seem to be merging. One is the wisdom that people have seen from the disruption that one has seen in the last 4 years. The other is also that there is this discussion and debate on whether globalization is actually a great strategy for supply chain. I mean, there's a conversation going on in certain segments. And in certain segments, people do talk of having supply chain which is resilient in terms of +1 strategy or +2 strategy. And it's important to understand these conversations, because these ultimately drive the type of monies that are going to be put in the future of supply chain. So, Chad, what's been your experience on these two things? How are these points entering the boardroom discussions in terms of what should be the supply chain strategy for the future?
Yeah, we work on that every day to figure out what the supply chain strategy of the future should be. Clearly, the globalization theme is going to continue, right? I mean, the economies of the world are very interconnected, and the flow of goods and services throughout the world is interconnected. And so I think, while nothing was easy in the pandemic, I don't think anything is easy in the supply chain post-pandemic. But certainly one of the ways that we know, if you had one product in one market using one ingredient, the world would be a lot easier, right? The problem is that's not the reality for most of us. And so we've got to learn how to deal with complexity and disruption at scale. And we've certainly learned, and our businesses have learned, the criticality of the supply chain in enabling business results. And so, we have, as to your original comment, we've invested a lot more in technology to deal with that complexity and that disruption and that scale that we all experience. We look at technology not just as a bunch of use cases, though. We look at it as really being necessary to create new ways of working, and more importantly, to solve, the real business problems of the day. So it's easy to get enamored with AI and Gen AI and ML and all these acronyms, but the reality is, the solutions that we really need to be driving are those that solve the business problems of today. And Albert Einstein had a quote once that said, if you only have an hour to solve a problem, he would spend 55 minutes of that hour defining the problem and 5 minutes developing the solution. And so I think technology is the solution, but we need to get really, really clear on the problems. And so we've gotten really clear on the problems. We have, made differential investments in our technology development to solve those problems, and have dozens of use cases running around the country or running around the company that are creating some very good combinations of the insights from AI and ML together with workflow automation that we would say that's really where intelligent execution starts to happen, where those actions turn, or the insights turn into action, and that's what we really rely on our technology to do.
That's interesting. Barbara, in your case also, is the attention to supply chain discussions being given a different color now with all these learnings and disruptions, etc.?
The answer is yes. I don't know.
So you're happy?
The attention to the supply chain. I think I've been in the business more than 30 years. It's my 34th years. I started at BMW, and I knew exactly when we, at this point in time, 1990s, we were establishing very detailed supply chains around what we would call how far can we go to the best cost countries to get the most competitive parts out of certain commodity like harness, which has more than 1,000 minutes of manufacturing time on it. So we would go in the last detail, in the last perfection, in this kind of just in sequence supply chain. But this has changed. This has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, right? We have now been investing into digitalization of our supply chain, really end-to-end. For example, digital twins, starting from certain commodities right to the end of the assembly line. Of course, using a lot of new technologies, AI, of course, applications on this to help us, but not only to get the transparency, but to get the transparency really fast. And for example, if we have an anticipated risk in the supply chain, that we can also have digital tools concerning our production planning. So how would a scenario disrupt our manufacturing or respective our supply chain? Because we also learned if we change the program with a too short notice, this could lead to even a bigger damage in our overall supply chain. So many hours in the boardroom talking about suppliers, about supply chain, about production program, about inventories, because all these things, also artificial intelligence helps us to find the optimal inventories. In all our plants, we have worked on these features. So I guess this has switched the focus from only competitiveness now to resilience, and also having potential geographical risks in mind, and maybe always having a plan B or a plan C if something occurs. And there's also a lot of earthquakes, floods, and other things going on, unfortunately. So this is also on top of us, right?
So, one thing that I'll just add, Barbara, I'm glad you brought this up. There's a lot of talk about AI and how it drives productivity, but Barbara brought up examples where AI and machine learning can help us with resilience. We see a great use in helping us with our sustainability commitments. So we've got a product. Imagine if you had one order a day of one product from one production location, it'd be pretty easy to optimize that going forward, wouldn't it? Like if Walmart ordered or one of our retailers ordered a half a truckload on Monday and a half a truckload on Tuesday, we would say, well, why don't we just combine those into one full truckload and ship it on Tuesday? We'd have that conversation with the retailer and we'd make that happen. Obviously at scale, that's not as practical. We process 3,000 orders a day here in our Global Capability Center here in India, and we've used AI to really automate that process end to end so that we can make the best decisions possible around how to deploy the product, how to get more product on each truck. So, one of the products of the pandemic was the availability of trucking and transportation was limited. So we get sort of a win-win when we can optimize our trucks on the road, minimize those to the greatest extent possible, have fewer shipments in and out of our retail locations and our warehouse stocks, which allows some labor efficiencies, and ultimately allows us to service the orders better. So our deployers here are able to make recommendations from AI. The AI helps assess the risk and make recommendations. We make about 400 recommendations per night that we can then make to the business teams for how they can optimize their business. And we see about 70% of those recommendations actually being adopted by the businesses, and we're saving about $50,000 a day. $50,000 a day, fewer trucks on the road, enabling us to grow, make a healthier planet, and save some money in the process.
So what's coming out is that the way we are looking at supply chain has changed. It's gone up the priority area from an investment perspective. And when you look at the cost of inventory plus one strategy and sourcing and creating an ecosystem, a lot is being rethought, and technology is playing a very important role in this. Now, I've personally always believed, and I'm throwing it up for that technology out conversation, that era where you put technology in the front is gone. It has to be use case first. This is my use case, and therefore, for this particular use case, these are the type of technologies I need to use. And these are the type of technologies which will give me more effective productivity, etc., etc. How do you guys go about evaluating technologies and looking at this hype, and how do you then cull out your technology strategy? I mean, maybe Barbara and then Chad.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a very important point, which as an operational leader is very close to my heart, because we do not digitize or automate because this is a cool technology, right? There needs to be a use case. There needs to be a benefit for the business. There needs to be an increase in competitiveness or an improved sustainability or CO2 emission, stuff like that. So I think it's always important to first look at the process, optimize the process first, and then look at the technology, and then look at whatever tools, whether it's digitalization as a whole, or whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's augmented reality, all these things. For me, this has no sense per se. It needs to serve either the sustainability targets, the competitive targets, or quality. And I think I have been discussing for many years that people do not just install and implement fancy tools and don't know what the ultimate target is. So this is, from my side, a very strong reminder in a competitive environment around sustainability, quality, and economics. It needs to serve an overarching target, and that's what I'm holding all our technologists accountable against.
So in other words, you're saying, don't come and talk to me about cool technology. Come and tell me how can you solve complex use cases that I have. It could be whatever technology, I don't care till you're solving my use case and giving me the benefits that I need. So is that the pitch you're really looking at when people come and talk to you about technologies and solutioning and et cetera, et cetera?
Exactly, but we also have it the other way around, that technologists we are very close with our teams, and I even have a innovation and digitalization team as a direct report to me for the end-to-end ecosystem from supply chain basically to the delivery, because as you said, distribution also of the cars, of the finished car plays an important role as well. And I share, these are my current problems, that we share, these are the problems, do we have use cases, and they share some use cases sometimes from other industries. And we are also working, for example, with NVIDIA or other companies like TCS is here and TTL heavily, and they are sharing also use cases from other industries, which is sometimes very beneficial for us, not only the use cases from your own industry.
Yeah, but it's from a perspective of application of technologies, right? Chad, you're very clear, only 5% in solutioning, 55% on ideation. So I think that's a great example. Please.
Yeah, I think, the one other little quote that I'll throw your way that I've liked and I've seen recently is, we won't be replaced by AI. We will be replaced by people who know how to use AI. So the reality is we all need to figure out how to use AI to solve the problems that our businesses face. I mean, that's the reality of it. And so I can get enamored with technology just like anybody, but resources are scarce, our time, our capital, our people. And so, how we evaluate technology is similar to what Barbara said. We look at, what is the problem that needs to be solved? How can we enhance decision speed, collaboration, and results generation through technology? And so one of the really cool spaces that Barbara made me think about is we have a project going on in our manufacturing locations right now that are allowing us to do some things at scale that was just impossible to do with the human capacity that we had in the manufacturing environment. So we're looking at inputs such as the incoming attributes of our raw materials, moisture levels, fat content, protein, etc., on an hour-by-hour basis. We look at how that correlates to performance and what the machine settings were at the time that we were enabling that optimal performance. And so we then can generate a set of conditions that can say when we have this kind of incoming raw material with this machine setting in this sort of environmental circumstance, we have optimal output. And so when we can look at that and adjust the parameters in our manufacturing system based on all of those factors, we can get more output for the same inputs. And we think that's pretty powerful. And so we are beginning that use case now. It's generating about a 30% reduction in waste and performance improvement, which is remarkable. That's the use case that is most important for us, saving the food the world needs, and doing so in a way that can bring more value to consumers. And so we're really excited about that. And then the next important part will be when we can generate write-back capability into our control systems so that the systems can automatically adjust equipment set points, et cetera, based on those environmental conditions, incoming raw materials, et cetera. That's the power of AI as we've seen it, solving the business problems that we've been after for 50 years.
So one question each on a topic that I think we need to know your point of view, and then we'll have requests for any questions. 5 years down the line, how does a supply chain architecture look like for you? AI-driven, global, resilient? What are those big-ticket decisions that will drive the next gen of supply chain architectures? Chad, maybe since you're on the topic.
That's a big question. 5 years down the road, I think it's hard to look more than a couple years down the road, frankly. But I think that we will, the use of technology to augment the humans in our process will continue to advance. So that is one. It is, AI augmented with humans will allow us to create, the best possible scenarios and optimize a set of conditions to deliver for the business. So that will remain true. I think, I listened to one of the speakers earlier and he was talking about eliminating the drudgery from work, the work that nobody really likes doing, but you have to do it in order to get to the outcomes that make a difference for the business. My hope is that 5 years down the road, a lot of the drudgery will have been eliminated from the work that we all do or that our teams do in factories across the world every day through the use of sensor technology, IoT, AI, et cetera. And that we'll be able to focus on the things that matter most. Generative AI, gives us the ability to focus on the things that matter most that frankly algorithms and computers can't do for us.
Barbara, you've seen it all. 35 years, and now how do you see supply chain emerging over the next 5 years?
It makes me feel so old if I remember
Sorry,
it.
only 35 years.
No, I'm good. I'm good with this. I think for me the most important point is end-to-end visibility and transparency of the material, right, from the supplier and tier supplier even, and optimizing the inventory along this chain, transparency, visibility, all digital in real time. This is definitely something we are heavily working on, and we have really good optimization already in place with all our Tata ecosystem supporting us. I think that's one thing, because it's already feasible, right? And it's realistic. And the second thing is to have this risk planning, management, risk mitigation before a problem occurs, right? To mitigate the risk and having all these new scenarios, potential plan Bs, potential second source, potential where could we have another stock or a supplier, where could we relocate if a risk or a catastrophe occurs. So I guess end-to-end, real-time, digital, having risks and risk mitigation in plan, I think that's something which is definitely possible in JLR in the next 5 years.
Thank you. And I think with the type of experience Barbara and Chad have, I think their views possibly can be considered a representative view that a large number of people in supply chain across the globe are talking of. A couple of years down the line, you'll see a lot more of technology intervention in all the type of things that they've talked of, plus one strategy, risk mitigation, inventory, and more importantly, what's really happening now is, as they said, is that this whole topic of supply chain and its importance is being unpeeled in front of a larger audience. Its importance was felt by the larger public for the first time when we saw a lot of shortages in the last few years. Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you so much, Chad. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting stuff that people would have taken away. We have about 2.5 minutes. We'll be happy to take a few questions, 1 or 2 questions if anybody has from Barbara or Chad. Yeah, please. There is a gentleman there. Yeah, so we have 2 questions. If you have the mic, you can go first. If you could just come this side, please. Sure. You're getting a mic there.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now? Okay, some great insights from the panel. Thanks so much. The question is, during the COVID times, it came through that too much reliance on China for manufacturing could be an issue. So thoughts on that, and that integrated with the other question that with things moving toward lights of factory, total automation, the factory is dark and things are happening automatically. So is there a possibility of manufacturing shifting to the West again because it will again become cost competitive? So
Could you repeat the last part again? Got the China problem, but the last part, the possibility, sorry?
So with China becoming an issue and companies realizing that they should have
Can speak a bit louder. No Chinese is listening.
Okay, so first thing, now I'll be quite loud, yeah. So the first thing was China, total reliance on China becoming an issue, so companies looking at other alternatives. And second is this whole thing of automation, the lights of factory, that the factory is totally dark and everything is happening automatically. So is there a possibility of manufacturing shifting back to the West because the West can become cost competitive because of everything being automated? So what are your views on that?
Okay. Is it clear, Chad or Barbara?
Can you give us some
context? So the question
is
that we saw a lot of these for everybody. He seems to be scared of the Chinese, so don't have to be. His question, and I'm sorry if I miss out, I'm just paraphrasing. His question was, we've seen a lot of disruption during China, and now with all this +1 strategy was discussed. A key question that the gentleman asked was, is there a possibility of manufacturing shifting back to West, and intervention of technologies could bring down the cost of manufacturing and thereby an incentive to moving it to the West, right, sir? One of you would like to take that question?
I can start. And as I said, this what we OEMs learned in this phase where we couldn't do anything. For example, Shanghai harbor blocked for weeks, no transparency what's going on. Of course, we will come up with strategies which will help us that we are in charge of our supply chain. So yes, but of course we will also work in China, but maybe we will have a China for China and other supply chains for the Western countries. And that's not to answer in general, but I can only tell you we are much more sensitive towards this risk and towards, you know, the possibility that we are not in charge of our supply chain. So definitely it's stuck in my mind, and we will make sure that this is not happen again, right?
But he actually brings out a very valid point. At what point would technology implementations become so cost effective that you can move back production to the West? I mean, that's really a profound question, and
no,
I'm sure
it's a good question.
Yeah,
it's a good question. I believe if we implement all our technology properly, it's rather an advantage for the high qualified capability countries, right? Because they can then get more jobs and better jobs with a higher qualification. I fully agree.
And on the way from China to US, do stop in India for 1 or 2 plants. Yes, sir, please. This is the last question, so if you can make it quickly.
Really trying to keep to time.
Yep,
you can get hold of them just as they get off stage. They're going to get off stage from that side. What an absolutely fabulous conversation.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.